Hello, I'm Andy from Etc. Advisory, and I wanted to talk today about office refuseniks. These are the people who, despite our best motivations, are resisting coming back to being in the office. And I know there's a whole spectrum of points of view on this, and the agencies I work with all have different views on how much time they want their teams to spend in the office or working remotely. But broadly, the consensus seems to have been that we want our teams to benefit from the flexibility of working remotely, but we also want them coming into the office. There's a great quote, I think, from Harvard Business Review that I'll come to on in a second, actually. Principle, though, is that there are some people, there's a rump of people who are resisting coming back and finding reasons not to. And it can be disruptive, and it can be difficult to manage. And I've got a couple of ideas around how you can deal with it. But this is not me making the case for working from the office. I think flexibility is one of the great things to come out of the pandemic. But a Harvard Business Review article about working remotely said that what early digital commentators missed is that even if we can work from anywhere, that does not mean that we want to. We strive for places that allow us to share knowledge, to generate ideas, and to pool talents and perspectives. Human aggregation, friction, and the interaction of our minds are vital aspects of work, particularly in the creative industries. So I think it's unarguable that being back in the office sometimes is more beneficial than working remotely or teams being remote from each other. And frankly, the word remote is used for a reason. I mean, this idea of remoteness, lack of proximity, it can be made to work and is highly beneficial, but it does mean that we are remote from each other. And some people have said that meeting remotely is Graham Orcott, I think it was, said that meeting remotely is easy, but connecting remotely is harder. And I think that's the crux of it for me. So one of the exercises I used to give students when I was lecturing way back in the day was to get them to take a counter position, which is a good way of getting you to think about another perspective, clearly. So I think if you're struggling with people who, for whatever reason, are resisting coming back to the office, are finding reasons not to come back, once you've taken all the precautions you need to and so on, a good exercise is to ask them to make the case for people working in the office. So what are the great reasons for working in the office? What are the reasons for being together? Maybe not in the office, but at least in proximity to each other, and get them to make the case. And at least it gives them then the headspace to really sort of reflect on their own drivers and motivations, and to see to understand more about where they're coming from. And there might be a little bit more sort of emotional honesty coming from that. I think the killer question here, though, is that if you ask, I think people can kid themselves with that first counter question position. So the way to really address it is to say, if you, in a frictionless world where commuting was effortless, where it wasted no time, where being in the office was just as easy as working from somewhere else, and you could only have one of those options, you could only ever work in the office, you could only ever work remotely, which would you choose? And if someone genuinely explores that with purpose and good intention, it's quite hard to come down on the side of working remotely for a lot of people. If you still have refuseniks who are managing to make a case or believe they're making a case for only ever working remotely, then you can push this question one step further, which is to say, if you were in this frictionless world we've invented for ourselves, if you were only able to meet clients remotely or clients face to face in this frictionless world, which would you choose and why? And there isn't a case that says meeting clients or doing new business remotely is going to be a better option than meeting people face to face. And that's because of that Graham Orcott point, which is it's easy to meet, but it's harder to connect. And so really, if you have to push someone that far, that's the way I'd take it. So take a counter position, get them to argue why being in the office or being in face to face is so valuable. If they're still resisting, then push them with the 2 killer questions, I think, and then you'll start to get to the point where people really do have to accept that there are occasions when meeting face to face and meeting primarily therefore in the office is the better thing to do. So you puncture or get them to puncture their own argument. The fact is, it simply doesn't suit some people to come into the office. We know that. It's I was reading today actually that a lot of people are missing commuting, which I find very hard to believe, having done it for decades. But it is a pain to get up and walk to the station or queue in the traffic. It does feel like dead time. It feels very tiring to have to, rather than just finishing your day and closing the door and walking into your kitchen, rather than walking across rainy London to catch a train and then dragging yourself back to wherever you live. So it does suit some people to work remotely, and I think that's what we're dealing with. Is outside of understandable, acceptable concerns about COVID and safety and so on, it just suits some people to work from home. And I don't use working from home as a phrase generally. I use working remotely because I think you should be doing the best work you can from wherever that happens to be. And some people can't work from home, but could still benefit from working remotely on some occasions, so the library or the coffee shop or a beach in the Seychelles, whatever, wherever they're doing their best work. But working from home specifically definitely suits some people. And we've seen quite sort of extreme versions of this where people are resisting coming back to work because they're having a delivery in the afternoon, or the electricity board are coming around, or that's not a legitimate reason for not being in the office. So anyway, we've sort of explored the benefits of it. There's lots and lots of writing about this, and I'll share some links in underneath the video, or sort of attached to the article with the video. I think the solution, though, broadly, it revolves around management and communication. So firstly, you can do the exercise where you get people to challenge their own thinking, and then it becomes unarguable. But it is up to managers to have those conversations, to spot the people that might be resisting, even the ones who are doing it quite passively, the ones who are are complying with the sort of the guidance from the business, but kind of with a certain degree of hesitation. Managers have to be looking for this, and they have to keep the comms open. I think clarity around what's mandatory and what's not, clarity around the reason is really important. It's not good enough just to go, well, I've told them they should come in, they should come in. I think that's pretty old school thinking. You have to have really strong reasons why you want people to be in proximity. And again, I'll list some articles around that in the write-up of this video, but there are loads of reasons why people should be together, just thinking back to that Harvard Business Review quote. But making that case and being clear about when you expect people to be in the office and with each other, as opposed to times when it's acceptable not to be. I think a lack of clarity in there leaves wiggle room for people to exploit in there. I think there's one little tiny thing I spotted with people I've spoken to, not specifically amongst my clients, is that if you find you've got members of your leadership team or your senior management team who are resisting coming in to the office, that can be quite insidious. That can be the sort of send a cue to the people that work for that manager or work with closely with that manager, that it is okay to resist, that there is some self-selection in this process, that the mandatories aren't really mandatories. And I think that's where I would start. I'd be looking for the line managers who are resisting, because we as junior members of teams, we follow our managers' behavior, and those are the people that I think I would be talking to first, and getting them really on board and to understand what you're trying to achieve here. But I hope that helps. I think this idea of taking the counter position, and then if you need to, pushing those two killer questions really will help a healthy debate open in the business. Added to which, do some reading around the subject. There's lots of it, but clarity of policy and calling out those few office refuseniks, I think, is really going to help you. I hope that's been useful. If you did think it was useful, there's loads of stuff like this every week in Rambling On, my weekly newsletter for agency leaders and founders, which you can subscribe to at etc.co.uk. Please feel free to let me know what you thought about this. And if you've got an opinion, I'd love to hear it. Always looking for a new opinion. But thank you very much.